On behalf of UAF Summer Sessions and Lifelong Learning, welcome to those of you that are watching live stream. And this is our Discover Alaska lecture series. My name is Judy Harris, and I'm a member of an organization of educators called Delta Kappa Gamma, and members of our organization will be introducing the Discover Alaska speakers each week on Wednesday. At UAF, we acknowledge the Alaska Native Nations upon whose ancestral lands our campuses reside. In Fairbanks, our Dropieta campus is located on the ancestral lands of the Dene people of the lower Tanana River. This year's Discover Alaska Wednesday lectures are presented by UAF College of Indigenous Studies faculty members. Tonight we will hear from Jordan Lewis, Director of Research for College of Indigenous Studies and the Center for One Health Research. He will be discussing the importance of sharing knowledge for Alaska Native elders' ability to age well. What an important topic. Dr. Lewis is Aleut and Sugpiaq, and his family is from the Naknek Native Village in southwest Alaska, and also Cannon Beach, Oregon. He is the director of the research for the Center for One Health Research and a research professor with the College of Indigenous Studies at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks. He holds a PhD in community psychology from UAF, an MSW from Washington University in St. Louis, and a BSW from UAF also. He's a certified professional gerontologist. He's trained as a cross-cultural community psychologist and gerontologist. Jordan has worked with American Indian and Alaska Native communities to identify characteristics that enable Alaska Native elders to age successfully or age in a good way and become role models for their families and communities. Using the lessons and experiences of these elders, Jordan's research develops generative-based approaches to improve the health of all generations. Please help me to welcome Dr. Lewis tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that introduction. It is wonderful to be here. Wonderful to see so many elders. I was just saying earlier, I think the elders should be giving this presentation because they're the experts, but I've been lucky enough over the years to be able to spend time with elders across the state and hear their stories and their lessons and their wisdom. And so I always view my work as more, I'm the tool or the vehicle to share the stories and wisdom of our elders with other people who may not have that chance to visit with them. So less of a research presentation and more about this is what our elders want us to know about aging well and how do we implement that into our own lives. So a brief outline, starting off, who am I? Add a little bit more to that wonderful introduction, but also to give more positionality and kind of talk more about like what gives me the credibility or right to be up here to talk about this work. How did I get interested in this work and why is it important to me? Quick background on the work I've been doing over the years, and then for people who may not be familiar, kind of a really quick overview of what generativity is and how that relates to what our elders in Alaska are talking about in terms of how that applies to them being able to age well. Summarizing all this and then having time for some discussion and some questions. So who am I? As mentioned, my family are Aleut and Sugpiaq from Naknek. Also, my family are from Portland and Cannon Beach, Oregon, on my dad's side. Grew up as a commercial fisherman. My family actually just all arrived up in Naknek to begin preparing for the commercial fishing season. And it's about this time of the year my body starts craving salmon, so I'm always really excited for them to catch fish. I'm the oldest of 3. All my siblings still fish every summer and have their families, and it's always fun. And now as I'm growing older, the relationships and importance our siblings have in our lives. Professionally, trained as a social worker, a gerontologist, psychologist. Those are the things that I was really interested in, the tools, the education, to really think about those things I learned to really work with our communities in terms of helping our elders age as they wish. And when I was younger, I always got this question, especially in my MSW program, as someone who was back then in their early 20s, working with older adults really wasn't something most MSW students did. I think I was one of 3 students in that program, focusing specifically on older adults and social work. Why older adults? There's still this idea that, they're grumpy, they smell. That's usually associated with nursing homes. But it's because of the role models I've had. My family, the elders in my community, the elders I grew up with. And so these pictures here, just some of the examples of people who've been instrumental in my life and kind of either have helped me through my educational career or have really inspired me to work with older adults as role models of healthy aging. So we're all pretty familiar with the history of Alaska, but I think it's important as I work with medical students, psychology students, anyone maybe not familiar with Alaska, but when we work with them, their history comes with them, and so being aware of what they've been through in their life. And we started adding this aspect to our research over the years because we started noticing as older adults were talking about their experiences of aging, what it meant to age well, history started really playing a big part in how they understood what it meant to be well, what it meant to be older. And so we wanted to make sure that we are aware of this when we're analyzing our data, we're training students, that for a lot of our elders, this is what they've been through. A lot of adversity, a lot of challenges, some aspects of trauma, boarding schools, this loss of culture, loss of language. And despite all of that, they're still very resilient. They still have this optimistic outlook on life. So what is it about our elders that we can learn from that enables them to still have that outlook? Now, on the other side of that, of course, are elders who are not doing as well. And that's a population that our research team hasn't had the chance to work with yet due to a variety of different things. But as we think about these experiences, we'll come back to this again. So in this research on healthy aging, we want to make sure we have a balanced perspective. Our work is really focused on, how do Alaskan elders define successful aging? But we also want to know, what are the challenges? What does unhealthy aging look like? And when we started this research, a lot of the elders kept asking us, successful compared to what? Why are you making me compare myself to someone else when we're all the same? We all have different experiences, but we're all Native elders. And when we look at these 2 lists, elders, we just talked about the history, there are different challenges elders and people in general are experiencing, right? Trauma, abuse, neglect, relocation, talking about boarding schools. We're also now seeing in the research around making this decision to move elders maybe to long-term care facilities, whether it's temporary or long-term, is bringing up memories of being moved for boarding schools. So there's this new trauma. How do we educate long-term care providers that they may have this history of boarding schools and this might be why they're having these experiences? Climate refugees, families, communities, elders having to relocate because of climate change. This also brings up some of these memories. And then family relocation. We've been looking at families going back and forth from rural to urban and what impact that has on elders' well-being. Making that decision. Do I try to stay in my village and live independently when I don't have a family support system anymore? Or do I follow them to an urban environment or somewhere else and maybe not have that support or feel like I'm at my home anymore? All of these challenges, we hear about loss of cultural practices, loss of language, the history. And this is what we always see, and what I read when I started my educational career. This is what the literature focuses on, these challenges, these losses. As a researcher, we're forced to focus on the the disparities, the problems, the things that Native communities are struggling with. We have a lot of strengths, and I think that's important to remember. How do we weave these together? We may have these challenges. We can't ignore those challenges, but we need to remember there's a lot of strengths that our elders bring to us. And several of these strengths come from being able or having overcome some of these adversities. Family is a strength. If a healthy family is present, or fictive kin, your community is a sense of strength. Bringing back, maybe you're involved in learning your language, bringing dance back, your culture, eating your native foods, and the list goes on. These are just some of the examples we've heard in our data. But thinking about these, we need to remember there's a balance, and to make sure to not ignore one or the other. So shifting gears, I want to ask the audience, does anyone know what it means to be generative or can define generativity who's not a psychologist? Or you can answer that too. But
wait, let me think. I looked up the definition like 6 months ago. I think it has to do with like generations interacting with each other, maybe.
It's part of it.
You can tell me I'm wrong.
That's part of it. Any other ideas on what it means to be generative?
Give back.
Yeah.
Give back. Generations interacting together is the other. Right, so to be generative is to pass on your skills, your knowledge, what you've learned through your lifetime to improve the future generations or the quality of society for others. So there's this idea, Erik Erikson came up with this. We're not really sure, there's one article that's not really a research article, that Erikson came up with the 7 stages of human development. This is one of those stages when he was working with the Yurok and Sioux tribes, because to me, being generative or passing on your knowledge is a very indigenous concept. It's a value we're raised with, right? And so that's what it means to be generative. And in our research, we're noticing this is very important to elders. So to get more technical, there are different types of generativity. Technical generativity is this idea that I'm going to teach you how to do something very concrete, write a grant, build a fish wheel. These are things you can walk away with, skills that you'll have. The most common thing people have in life, most people who are generative, is by having kids. That ensures your legacy into the future. So biological and parental generativity. Grand generativity is the favorite people like to talk about, becoming a grandparent. The role that has, teaching your grandkids, talking about their lives. And then there's more this idea of cultural or creative generativity. Very few articles have actually focused on this area. Cultural generativity is this idea that I'm going to teach you the morals or values of a society. The one article on this topic is much more focused on like the morals and values or institutions at an academic institution. What's the culture of being a college student? What's the culture of being in a fraternity? What's the culture of being from this certain community? And so wanted to take it a little bit further. And so later we'll talk more about how do we advance that to really match what we're seeing in Alaska. So why care about generativity? Why is this so important? This is all from literature and our elders, but there are actual health benefits of being generative or having those opportunities to pass on your knowledge or share your stories and your wisdom. For example, you find a sense of purpose that contributes to your identity. This idea you feel like you have this outlet. People want your knowledge, and so it's important that there's an opportunity for you to have a chance to do what you want to do in your community or other places. You're engaging in meaningful activities, greater social engagement. So whether you're volunteering in the school or you're doing other activities, it's getting you out of the house, you're interacting with other people, maybe interacting with other elders themselves. Redemptive narratives comes more out of the recovery literature. It also relates to generativity. This idea that, and it doesn't have to be, substance use related, but having past adverse experiences, whether it's domestic violence, relocation, trauma, something else happens in your life, through time, as you start telling that story over and over, you begin to heal, and you find those lessons in that experience. And those lessons are what you're telling young people. So whether it's, hopefully you'll share those experiences with them, they'll avoid similar situations. Spirituality is part of generativity. Some people find that a really important part of their identity. And actually, they report higher levels of optimism. So when you feel like you have a chance to share your knowledge, you report feeling better about yourself. Your quality of life improves. There's actually studies that show improves aspects of your physical health as well. But on the downside, not everyone gets a chance to be generative, so there are actually documented negative impacts if you don't have a chance to share your knowledge. You become stagnant, which is more like isolated. You become more self-absorbed, which is more like you're all worried about your own legacy versus the legacy of helping others see a better future. You become more lonely and isolated. Your relationships may not be as high quality, meaning maybe they're just people you interact with. They're not really more deep social, meaningful connections. People report lower life satisfaction. They're not as happy. They're not as engaged. They might not reach out to their communities. They become isolated. And the research that we do, these are the elders that their curtains are closed. They don't come out of their home. People don't interact with them. We're not sure why, because we're not given access to those elders to ask them, what are your barriers to being engaged? And they also talk about if you don't have a chance to share your knowledge, you cope with different aspects of poor mental health, whether it's depression is the biggest one. So more specifically, so we talked about the pros and cons of generativity. There's a lot of research that's more focused specifically on health. The big thing to take out of this part of the presentation is that being generative is great, but it has to be received by somebody else in a good way. So for the best example I have is if you're teaching an 8 o'clock class, let's say it's math or something else, and it's 8 o'clock on a Monday morning, and half your students aren't there or they're doing something else, my desire to teach kind of goes down. Like, if you don't want to be here, why do I want to be here? So if it's not well received by others, studies show that your desire to be generative actually starts to dwindle and you don't share as much. So it has that negative effect. This is also a growing concern among elders we've talked to because they're starting to see in some places, not everywhere, youth are just less interested in spending time with elders. Usually due to what the elders are interested in sharing, the wisdom they have, doesn't always align with what youth are interested in or want to know about. And so this is referred to as the generative mismatch. And so part of this work that we're looking at is how do we fix that? Can we find things that are of interest to both generations so we can hopefully avoid both generations having poorer health outcomes? Sharing redemptive narratives, this idea that unfortunate events can be unfortunate. You can live in that moment. You can kind of figure out why did it happen. And over time, as you're sharing those experiences, as I mentioned, lessons start to come out of it. And you also heal, right? That you're taking the power away from that negative event. And you might have an experience where someone's asked you to share what happened to you when this happened to you when you were younger. You can share that story, and now there's a lesson out of that, right? So hopefully the other person who's hearing it will say, oh, that's similar to what I'm experiencing. Maybe if I follow what they did or kind of learn from their experiences, I can avoid that. And so hopefully through that reflection, you can actually lead to behavior change with the focus. This focuses on younger people. We also know people who are generative live longer. We're not sure why. Maybe it's because of higher quality of life. They're more socially engaged. Isolation is not very good for anyone's health. But also live with fewer comorbidities, so multiple diseases. So that's a quick overview of generativity, why it's important, why should we study it. Shifting now into our 17-year-long research study that we've been doing. First started off called Alaska Native Successful Aging, What It Means to Be an Elder in Bristol Bay. It started off as my dissertation research. It was just a goal to be just a dissertation. Finished, be done, that's the best kind of PhD. 17 years later, because communities have kept asking us to come visit, it's just continued. And thankfully, the National Science Foundation has been gracious enough to fund us those 17 years. This has become the unofficial logo of our research. It was designed in collaboration with one of the regions of Alaska we've worked with. Salmon's important to all of us. It was selected by the Elder Advisory Committee. And as I had mentioned earlier, successful aging is a very Western concept. Elders always kept asking, successful compared to who, compared to what? And so through conversations, we changed our interview guide, we changed the research question, and now we ask, how do you age in a good way, or how do you age like your elders? Everyone we've talked to all have a role model they look up to. Whether you're 40 or 90, they always talked about someone they looked up to who was aging better than them. And then aging in a good way just made more sense than successful aging. And so this has become a symbol of the research we do. It is on over 1,000 hoodies across the state of Alaska. It's on coffee cups and berry buckets. And we just got several a couple hundred tote bags made. Again, thanks to the gracious support of our funder, we've been able to be creative in how we disseminate our data. This is so the elders in this region said, well, publications are great, posters are important, our community report is important, but if you're standing in line at the grocery store, you're walking through the community and you see this will remind you what your elders want you to know what it means to age well, whether you're 4 years old or you're 90. And these words in here, each one is the most commonly used word used by an elder when asked, what does it mean to age well? The larger the word, the more often it was said in these interviews. So as you can see, laughter, happy, sharing were quite often talked about. Anyone have an idea of how they would define successful aging? How would you define successful aging? What would it mean to you to age in a good way?
Being active, taking part in community projects.
Great, thank you. Being active, engaging community projects. Any other ideas? Teaching.
Ongoing learning.
Ongoing learning, spending time with youth. Great ideas. So when successful aging became popular in 1987, and then became more popular in 1997 with Rowan Kahn's book here, Successful Aging, their definition was based on a disease model of aging, but also on a very non-Hispanic white population in LA. So you can imagine the definition they came up with didn't really align with the elders I grew up with or the elders we know. And so because of that, if you took their definition of successful aging, I didn't meet that definition. The elders I grew up with didn't meet that definition. So are they all aging poorly? Are we all just failing at growing older? And so my dissertation wanted to actually figure out, what do Native elders think about healthy aging? My dissertation was also one of the first studies where researchers sat down with an elder and asked them themselves, what does this mean to you? All the previous work of Rowan Kahn's was really focused more on a theory-driven perspective, meaning, for example, using activity theory. The more active you are, well, the more healthy you're going to be. Well, that makes sense. And so their sample would be people who meet that criteria of being physically active. So you can imagine if you're physically active, live in LA, what you think healthy is very different than physically active in Unalakleet and you're 90. And so when I started the research, again, very few articles focused on any racial ethnic minority population, even fewer on American Indian and Alaska Native populations. So we're missing that voice. I'm happy to say now, this many years later, it's getting better. There are many more different perspectives, different ways of thinking about successful aging. But back in 2006, 2007, when I started my dissertation, these are some of the books you would see. And so you look at these titles, you can see different disciplines also tried to really figure out, what does successful aging mean? Everyone wanted to figure it out. What was the secret? How could I live longer, healthier? And so you can see like neuroscience, psychology, behavioral health. And so everyone tried to look at figuring it out. My committee even tried to say, could you come up with a checklist that we could all check off what we're doing right and maybe we live longer? It's a great idea, right? But what if you check those things off and you still don't age well? It's very subjective. So this is to give you an idea. So as I mentioned, it started off in Bristol Bay, my dissertation research, and over the years, we've been invited to go out to different regions of Alaska, and it's kind of just built since then. We have a few future sites left to go. We won't have a statistical representation, but we'll have representation of elders from across the entire state eventually someday if NSF is ever asked or allowed to move forward with funding. So the YK Delta, the North Slope, and Kodiak is the other location we are interested. They've all expressed interest. Now it's just waiting for the funding to ever come through or look at other options for funding. And so we've been really wonderful opportunities to travel across the state visiting with elders. So as I'd mentioned, it's 17 years long. 162 qualitative interviews have been completed. The average interview is about 2 hours. If anyone's interested in doing some secondary analysis, we have a lot of data. It's about 10,000 pages in a PDF. I compiled ones just to see. I was interested, like, how much data do we actually have? Age range is 46 to 93 years. And just some more statistics on our sample. We also, in every community we work in, we work with our elder advisory committees to hire a local translator if needed, so we make sure that language is not a barrier to participating. So some of our interviews are actually done in the native language of our participants. The other unique thing about our research is that rather than using a Western idea of older adult like 65, 67, what we do is we just ask the community to give us a list of people you recognize as an elder, and that's it. That gets away from, people who are active in their community, extremely healthy, bilingual, these things that we think are benchmarks of healthy aging. And so because of that, we've really been able to interview elders who have chronic illnesses, cancer, amputations, who are homebound, who have a variety of different things that would automatically make them ineligible for any other study on successful aging. But we also were able to see that health is not the only thing that matters when it comes to healthy aging. So rather than talking about the entire process of research, these are the major components across all 162 interviews on what's important to elders to age well, regardless in all the regions. So we're not looking region specific right now. Spirituality, native ways of life, community and family engagement, emotional health, physical health, and rather than saying generativity, intergenerational sharing is what we've used. Again, generativity is a very Western word. Native elders are like, what does that even mean? Most people in the country don't know what generativity is. Even the Gerontological Society of America, very few people can define it. And so we changed it to intergenerational sharing because that really captures what it means. So pulling all the data out that looks specifically at what elders talk about when it comes to aging well and generativity, it was probably 99% of our interviews. And it was really important for elders to, in order to age well, to have this opportunity and this outlet to share. Being generative, as we've talked about, similar to the literature, right? Having a sense of purpose, gives them meaning, contributes to their identity. They're able to fill these roles that, they've thought about their entire lives. And you grow up, you look up at these elders. I look forward to hopefully living long enough to grow older to be an elder. And so now they're able to fulfill those roles. Through their generative acts, right, they're also contributing to their health and well-being, not only of themselves, but their family and their community. And through this, all of our research we make sure has an application and is owned by the community. So we want to make sure that when we're done, we can work with them to turn that data into something applicable and useful for them. And so we ask them, what can we do with this data to help you, whether it's write a grant, now you have some data to support what your elders want, or create community activities that will bring elders and youth together. So you've had several communities that we've worked with use this to convince funders, convince tribal councils, we need more intergenerational programs and bringing people together. There's Elizabeth. So to us, generativity or intergenerational sharing is one of the native ways of life. It's just who we are. It's how we're raised. It's what's important to us. It's how we preserve our way of being and our way of life. So a few quotes from our elders. One elder shared, "They pass down things to you, and you've got to pass it on down to your kids, everything you learned. It's important to pass on what you know to people your same age." And then with regard to native ways of life and generativity, one elder shared, "The thing is, my children try to make sure I have an easy time with them out there in the country. That's one of the benefits of my family." And within that quote, they're talking about how when they're out sitting, picking berries for hours, they would share stories, and the young kids would sit there and learn from them. So as I'd mentioned, culture generativity, there's one article that I've been able to find that came out of Australia that's more focused on this idea of culture of a different type of environment. They used college, for example. So of course, one of my mentors, Dr. Jim Allen, who's now retired in Minnesota, he's like, "Well, let's just come up with our own." And so I was like, okay, like how do you? So he's like, what we need to do is you need to take some different data sets. We looked at the people awakening data. We had successful aging data. And I had data from when I was in Seattle with a homeless Alaska Native population. We looked across all those data sets. Is successful aging and generativity still important in populations that are not just focused on what we're asking about healthy aging? And so we're able to come up with this idea of indigenous culture generativity. And it's this idea, Erickson's really focused on the individual legacy. What am I going to do? What is Jordan going to be known for when I pass on my research, whatever? So making it bigger, indigenous culture generativity is really focused on what do we pass on that's our legacy of our community, our family, our values, that's beyond us, beyond our family, not so much this individual focus. So it could include your traditional values, your language, your beliefs. And so it's really important to think what's important outside of ourselves. So another quote from our elders, one elder shared, "Elders can have a class to show them how to build a harpoon or how to put together a sled. We need to have more activities where elders can get out and show their skills." And this not only comes from the elders talking about they want to have these opportunities to share their knowledge, it's coming from other community members as well. I want to learn from my elders, or I don't know how to do this. How do we do this? And so there's a variety of different reasons this knowledge is not transmitted to all generations, but it's important to everyone. So a few more quotes. One elder shared with us, the ones, referring to the elders, that like to give advice to others and help direct the right way by talking age good. So this was talking about the elders who aren't doing well, bottle up everything inside, don't pass on their knowledge, don't find opportunities to really share what they've known before they pass on, because as we know, we can't take it with us. Another elder shared, as they age, they like to share about awareness and knowledge, what obstacles they are facing, what they learn, and keep going. So this idea of like maybe redemptive narratives, but finding those adverse experiences, learning from it, and then moving forward. So the challenges of generativity, so it seems like, if you have the right environment, the right opportunities, you could be generative. It seems like it's a natural thing. Communities want it, people want it. But there are challenges, whether it's the generative mismatch where you don't have youth asking their elders questions, or it's hard to find a location or time to bring them together. And so how do we find how do we match people up? How do we find interests across generations? That's the question. And this is not to say this is happening everywhere. We need to remember also, I think part of our research is to find those best practices. There are communities that are doing phenomenal work around bringing elders and youth together. There's their culture camps in the summers. There's other, First Alaskans Elder Youth Conference. There's some things we could look at as best practices or best models. But we are hearing concerns, right? That's not to say we can only focus on those and kind of hope they'll just take over and blossom, which would be wonderful. But with technology and all these other things happening, climate change, family outmigration, some places this gap is widening, and how do we stop that from happening? The other side of technology we're also learning is it's bringing generations together. I think we need to, 10 years ago we used to say, 15 years ago, elders, they're not good at technology. Nowadays, most elders I talk to have a cell phone, they're on Facebook, they can FaceTime. So how do we help bring that together and use technology also to our benefit? So these are examples of what communities we've worked with have developed as a result of having these conversations, these visits or interviews, have gotten people like, oh, we didn't know our elders were interested in this, or this is a great idea. Elder youth interactions, we hear UAF does a great job, other schools doing great jobs with elders in the classroom. We have local schools doing it, the Title VI program in rural Alaska, or the lunch program. Elders get their lunch at the grade school, which is offered during the school year. So there's a challenge with the summer months, but that's a great way for elders and youth to spend time together. They also talked about grandparents spending time with grandchildren. And a little different they were talking about than grandparents raising grandchildren. They may be raising them, but how do you just have fun just doing something? Go to a movie, pick berries that's not more strained or school-related or something else. They also talked about, I need to teach my own adult children. In some families, there might be a gap or the knowledge hasn't been transmitted down. Some of our elders said, I need to teach my daughter this recipe or how to do something because I haven't done that and she's in her 40s now. Or they're getting older. And then a simple thing, right? Like working with students. I've had a few students over the years who surprisingly and unfortunately have never spent time with an older adult ever, even been around an older adult. Whether that's because they don't live near their grandparents or just haven't had that opportunity. But the simple, ask elders, how are you? Where are you from? We'll spur this conversation of getting youth comfortable being around older adults. There's research that shows that also reduces ageism. It gets people more interested in spending time with elders in different ways. So going back to that earlier slide I talked about, the challenges and the strengths, I think part of what enables our elders to be generative and age well is they have found a way to weave those together, not ignoring the challenges they've experienced, but also remembering their strengths and putting those together and finding stories of both. And so they're passing down these stories and lessons on both the strengths, the things that are going well, but also these challenges. They're gonna happen regardless. You may try to plan as much as you can, something will happen in life that may be a challenge. Teaching other people to navigate the good and bad times. How do you navigate these ups and downs in life? And when you figure that out and know how to overcome or get through it, I think you become more resilient. Elders are aging well because they've learned something from all these experiences, good and bad. They take little pearls of wisdom from whatever they're experiencing, teaches them how to adapt, teaches them they are why they are in our research on aging well. They talk about, even doing our interviews, they're excited to talk about what they're doing right. We ask these questions of, how are you aging well? What makes you be well? Versus, we're here because you have diabetes, why aren't you fixed? Why are you not doing it right? They also hear, that sharing their lessons for them guides the future generations into a brighter, healthier future and helps them also figure out how to navigate these challenges. So now that we've covered all this, we've talked about successful aging, what we think that is. We've defined generativity. You've heard how elders are generative and aging well. How can you be generative? Any ideas?
So are you being generative when you're not an elder, but you're engaging with elders? So I think what in my experience anyway, that I've heard a lot of people, young people say like, well, I don't know how to interact with an elder. Like it's some sort of cookie cutter that you just do. There's step 1, step 2, step 3. And I just say that because I've experienced that myself where I'm like, well, I want to learn from elders, but I don't really know what to do. So I just started holding elder dinners at my house and asking them like, what do you want us to start knowing or doing that we're not already knowing or doing? And what if you could bring back one traditional activity that we're not doing anymore, like what would it be? These 3 have been at my elder dinners and it's been so phenomenal. And then a couple weeks ago, people have been talking about wanting to make birch bark baskets. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna reach out. And so I reached out to an elder and I said, hey, if all these people pay you $100 each, will you take them out and harvest some birch and roots and teach them how to make a basket? So last Saturday, 6 people worked with Vernell and made baskets in my garage. after they harvested the birchen roots. And I've seen Fernell twice since then, and each time she comes up to me, and she's like, that was so fun. Please give my number. If they struggle, tell them to call me. Come over and I'll help them. Like, she's so eager to keep working with them. And you could just see what a found she has for stuff talking about it.
Wonderful. That sounds great. Yeah, I love learning from our elders. Yeah, it can be intimidating for some people, not knowing like how do you start that conversation. But once you do, it's infected. You get excited. Any other ideas how people can be generative?
We have the elders of the Nakanaga. We meet every Thursday for sewing, feeding, and I've learned so much from this, listening to the people talk about. I went to boarding school, so I missed a lot, but I'm learning from them what I missed. The food, the sugar food, their history, family history, even my family history, which I really don't know much of because I didn't grow up except in boarding school. And I have a daughter that she was 10 years old, and she came up to me and she said, "You never have this, Mom. How come you don't have this? How come you don't say I love you?" And I couldn't believe it. And it kind of brought tears to my eyes, and I said, from now on, I said, I'll hug you every day and tell you I love you. I said, I grew up in a boarding school where nobody ever said, I love you or hug me. And that was a generational thing for me, from a 10-year-old girl to me who I was like 30 years old, even my teachers, my daughter, they taught me many, many things. Growing up in a boarding school is all roads. Stand in line, wake up at 7. It's almost like you're really military. You follow orders. You're nothing to elementary to junior high. And then you get to high school and you're into this adult role almost, like so naive. So unknowledgeable. And you find out that it's almost a challenge to be in high school. You have this peer pressure, you have stuff you never had to deal with before. And I swear I would never let my children go to boarding school ever. And I've made a lot of mistakes growing up. I did the best I can as a single parent. And you're so right in this being generational. Because I was the one that made change, positive change in my family. My girls tell me that all the time. So you're different from the way I grew up. And I think that's part of a generational thing that we experience as Indigenous people. Thank you for letting me share that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
You shared my daughter.
I had 4 children. The first 2, they were not interested in learning our native ways as the 2 younger ones. They were interested since they were little. Like if there was singing in the hall, native singing in the hall. My youngest son was really interested. He was also the mischief one in the group. All of us to watch him so he don't get hurt. one time he climbed this, all the kids in town knew that they're not supposed to climb this old sheet iron smokehouse because the iron is really old, and if they get cut with that, it's not going to be good. So he was the daredevil. He climbed up there and falling down. One day he got caught right there, and he was way up there hanging down with the his auntie had to sew him up. And that was the big thing for him. She didn't even know it. But that was, one of my cousins told me, don't stay in camp too long. We worry about you when you're in camp. And I said, well, I have to take a break from this kid is getting into everything. If I stay in camp, everything is fine. They're right around. He said, don't worry about that. He said, the mischief ones are the ones that's going to be help to us later on. And that was true. He's still interested in our native ways. And he learned, we were told not to speak our language to our kids when they were going to school. So we never spoke our language to them. But he was interested. After he grew up, he started practicing. And now he's one of our lead singers. I think the kids have to be willing to learn, interested in learning. Because my two older ones, one lives in Anchorage and one lives in Denver, Colorado. It kind of goes both ways. They have to have interest too.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, definitely it has to go both ways. We've got to find out how we get youth interested. Maybe it's just by leading by example, connecting them to people. So these are just some examples. I think the ones that have been shared are wonderful examples. These just come from literature, people we've talked to, but getting involved in your community, finding things that give meaning and purpose to your life, whether it's an advocacy thing or something you're personally interested in. Sharing knowledge with your family and friends like we've heard. Writing down your story. We hear several elders talk about I need to write down my stories, my knowledge, recipes, things that I want my family to remember. Tutoring or mentoring others. As I advance in my career, that's why I enjoy spending time with students, teaching them, whether it's how to do research, be in academia, go to college, how to, the first time they write a grant or write a paper, things that are. So these are just some things like we've mulled over this research, we've talked to communities, we make sure that what we're doing is always of benefit to the communities, moves, whether health and well-being forward, but also from the academic side, make sure it moves the field forward and is good for the university. One thing I'm particularly interested in is, there are these different forms of technology, of generativity, whether it's technical, biological, cultural. Are some of these aspects of generativity more beneficial than others? Is it better for your health and well-being to teach someone a technical skill? If I teach you how to fillet a fish or build a fish wheel? Or do you get more benefit from sharing a story, more cultural? And how do we measure that would be something we'd figure out. But then if we could find out if there's people who are maybe lower on the generativity scale, we could say, hey, is there something you could teach? They'll get a better impact on their quality of life by different aspects of generativity. A lot of our elders now, as we've moved through this research, right, we've been a lot of data. Now we're at this stage of developing interventions. We're also getting elders telling us, You need to start asking these questions of healthy aging to people in their 20s and 30s. Get them thinking about life decisions, health decisions, so hopefully they live long enough to be a healthy elder. So this is great you're asking us. Maybe I'm 60, 70, 90. 20, 30-year-olds in our communities need to have these same questions asked of them. Generative mismatch. The other question is most generativity research is focused on older adults to young people. No one's ever asked if you get the same benefits of sharing your knowledge with people who are the same age. So elder to elder. You can also get generative benefits when you're a young person also. It's not just older adults, but even younger people. But can you get the same health benefits if you're teaching an elder in your same age? So summarizing, there's our two boys with Elizabeth. The future generations, right? Making sure having your youth spend time with elders. This is Cody and William, making sure they have a bright future. Generativity is one of the key features of aging well for all ages, not just older adults. All people benefit. Being generative ensures a healthy future for not only the elders, but our youth and all the people in between. Youth learn the strengths of their culture, their family, their history, their language, as well as how to overcome maybe challenges they may face or have faced. Elders get the same things, same benefits. Maybe it contributes to their identity. They find meaningful activities, a sense of purpose. And then finally, the biggest one is we've learned in this research, you don't have to have perfect physical health to age well. So aging well does not mean absence of disease. You can still have other challenges in life, but as long as you have something in your life that gives you meaning, whether it's your spirituality, your community or family engagement, your mental well-being, being generative, teaching other people, you can age well, not just because you are perfectly fit and paid off your mortgage and live in LA. For the researcher and me, some references for people who may be interested. I want to thank you all for your time. Questions, comments, ideas?
One more thing. Keisha has this computer. She is taking this cultural singing. And her daughter was 4 years old, and she's listening to her every week, once a week, doing the singing with people all over. And there was a part, Tricia said, I can't remember that part, I got. And her 4-year-old daughter sitting there on the front covering pictures or something, started singing the song. And Tricia said, what the heck, my 4-year-old is singing the song I forgot. So I think it's really a cultural thing, they can learn at that age, just listening to other people. It's easier for them to pick it up. And that language is, I think if you hear the language every day, there was a man that told me that years ago, the Ravens used to speak Athabascan, because back then, only Athabascans spoke Athabascan language. They didn't speak English. And so for a long time, the Ravens were speaking Athabascan. Now, it's all mixed up now. There's so many different languages. So I think if a person hears it every day, Susan Passenbach first back when her children heard it every day. I mean, that's all she spoke in her house. I think even her husband might have learned too, I don't know. But her kids did. So, if it's something in your home, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think having elders in our home and intergenerational homes is something we should bring back. I think we don't have as many as we used to, but I'll be learning by just being present.
It is so good to be here. Hear you again. I'm getting slow to talk again. But I have so much experience of teaching as never. And I finally quit that because my speech was getting bad. And that's what happened, I think. You get the mind is okay, but trying to say it in words is harder. But we still need the youngsters, younger elders, our traditional through Inakanaka, that the best program they ever had for elders. Keep us going. They feed us lunch, then we teach whatever we can. Still lives in your mind. It's the best thing that ever happened to a person. Because after when I was one up, if the elders don't interact, they just forget. You know, so it's very good that we have that elder program. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's so wonderful to have you all here. And Elizabeth's been a mentor of mine since just a couple years, right? It's wonderful that always, yeah, close too.
Couple decades.
So long. And after retirement, I finally quit this thing. But I never. They're so good to be with younger elders. We're teaching them. And their youth especially, they're so curious. They're just so willing to learn. So keep it up. I hear you're leaving.
I told that.
Yes. Yes.
We'll visit.
Yes. Any other questions or comments? Last minute.
I just want to share one thing, two things. First of all, I would just say if anybody in the room wants to interact with our Indigenous elders, the Nakanaga, they open their doors to anybody in the community. You can bring your kids over there. They can visit with the elders, classrooms, stop by. They do caps for cops where the elders are teaching the cops how to make beaver hats for themselves. So please feel free to stop in Nakanaga, call there, find out their hours, bring your kids or grandkids by, bring anybody by because they love to give back. The last thing I just want to say and end on a really powerful story about generativity, or what do you call it?
Intergenerational sharing.
Intergenerational sharing is that Pauline Carlo, the late Pauline Carlo, when she was 90 years old, she taught my mom how to do beadwork at the age of 80 years old. And so my mom did her first piece of beadwork at the age of 80 that I got to own, and it's such a beautiful reminder of the healing that can happen, even when you're 80 years old.
Thank you.
What's the, can you spell the name?
Yeah, it's DENAAKK.
ANAAGA?
Yeah.
It's in the Morris Johnson building.
Yeah. DENAAKKAN.
AAGA?
Yeah.
So that-
AGA, I think. But Google will fix it for you if you get a word wrong, a letter wrong.
Thank you. That's at Morris Johnson.
Yes, in the back part.
Okay.
Fish and Game asked me to write, what was that now? Subsistence. So I wrote it out for them. They said, that's too long. Can you shorten it? I said, well, if I shorten it, it wouldn't mean anything.
We have native food, we have fish, mushroom soup, all kinds of native foods. Cranberry sauce, blueberries.
They always fix native foods for us at the Nakanaga.
Yeah.
They have pop-up.
Beaver meat.
Yeah. The pop-up markets, they have a whole craft in there that the elders sew and bead, where you can go purchase stuff.
Thank you.
Just
Thank you.